May you all rest well. Just don't check under your bed when you hear the scratching.
So this happened to me when I was about 5 years old, so kindergarten. I used to live in an old town that had a population of about 265 residents, all French-speaking community, and my family was not. We moved into this house and it was a very dark house with not many windows and a cheesy pink cross in the garage. Many things happened in this house, and this is just one story. I was a little kid, just hanging out in the basement shortly after we had moved in, and I was sitting on the only big chair I had of my own in the basement. As a kid, I was totally stoked to have the entire basement to myself. It was completely finished. As I was sitting on this chair, I had a bottle I was blowing over the top to teach you how to whistle, so I was practicing. I suddenly had a shadow fall over me, and I started to talk to whomever was standing behind me, thinking it was my dad. "Hey look Dad, I can do it. I can whistle, toot toot." Whatever it was, suddenly grabbed my shoulder. At first, it was just a hand. Soon, it was a lot of pressure to the point I winced and screamed out, "Hey, that really hurts, stop." I turned around at this point. There's nobody there. I'm quite freaked out, so I call out to see if my mum is in the laundry room. No answer. I bolt upstairs and my mum is in the kitchen. I ask her if somehow she came downstairs, grabbed my shoulder, and magically made it upstairs in a flash. She said no. I told her what happened and she kind of didn't believe me at first. Then I moved my shirt, and clear as day there was fingerprints on my shoulder, and a bruise was left behind. This is just one of many incidents that happened in this house. I want to start off by saying I'm not new to these experiences. My mother was a medium, and I'd often hear stories about her experiences. Then I started to have my own. A couple of months ago, I moved into an old house, built in 1902, and I felt something was there. I just didn't know how active what I felt would be. At first, it was small things, windows not being open or shut like how I left them, doors opening on their own, footsteps down the hallway when it was just my cats and I home. Like I said, small stuff. But things have grown more active in the past week. I've been poked and had someone say my name, as if trying to get my attention. I went into my room right after and it got real cold, real fast. This was the first contact he attempted to make. The days following this, I felt an uneasy feeling, as if I was unwelcome and was being glared at. This feeling wasn't constant, but I could feel where it was coming from, which let me know where he was. Footsteps became louder. Banging could be heard throughout the day in various rooms, although never in my room. My cats seemed to love my room and often claw the door until I let them in. Once they get in my room, they refuse to leave, hissing at the hallway as I get them out of my room. I believed there was just one spirit in my home, but last night left no doubt that there are two at least. I was laying down for bed, watching TV at a very low volume. All of a sudden, clear as day, right in my ear, "Hey!" I froze from the shock of a female voice loudly whispering in my ear. I keep watching my show, ignoring it, and then, "Hey!" More drawn out than the first time. I keep my eyes forward, but I see someone standing at the foot of my bed, out of the corner of my eye. She disappeared after a few minutes. She didn't feel malicious, but her energy definitely felt authoritative. A minute later, my cat started zooming, as they do, but I heard human footsteps following theirs, and I was the only one awake. That's all I have for this post. I plan to try and get some EVPs tomorrow when I get home from work. This isn't my first time experiencing paranormal activity. Far from it, actually. After I do the EVPs, I plan to do a cleansing. So this house I lived in for a short time as a kid was always very dark. All the shadows seemed to lean on the house. My parents' bedroom didn't have a window either. One night I was sleeping in the basement because that was where my room was. And from a very deep sleep, suddenly my eyes popped open, and I had that feeling like someone was standing in the room. It was really weird because this only happens to me, even as an adult, when someone comes into the room while I'm asleep. I was really confused and looked around and didn't see anything and tried to go back to sleep. I just couldn't. So I decided I was going to get up and go pee. There was only one washroom in the house, and it was on the first floor next to my parents' room. I got up, headed for the door. Before I reached the door slammed shut. I'm 5 and I'm terrified at this moment. I reached for the handle, turned the knob and pulled on the door. And it wouldn't open. I kept trying to pull on the door, getting frantic. I was always very strong as a kid. The door was bowing from me pulling on it, like someone was holding it shut above my head. I remember screaming, "Let me out! Let me out! Mom! Dad!" Nobody could hear me. I eventually managed to get the door open and flew up the stairs to the bathroom, flicked on the light, then went for my parents' room and tried to open the door. It was locked. I tried banging on the door, asking them to let me in. I ended up staying in the bathroom for probably an hour because it's the only place I felt safe with the light. I was even scared to go out into the living room, which I eventually did to grab a pillow and a blanket. I slept on the bathroom floor with the light on. In the morning, my parents found me and asked me why I wasn't in bed, and instead upstairs in the bathroom. I told them what happened. My parents said they heard nothing, not me screaming, not me banging on the door trying to get in. Which is weird because my mum's always been a light sleeper, and I can scream like a banshee. My dad, of course, didn't believe me. My mum did though. I refused to ever sleep in the basement again. My dad was mad, and I didn't care. I slept on the couch for weeks, sometimes in front of their door or in the bathroom because I was so scared, until they would bring my bed upstairs. Many things happened in this house, and the area is very old. A bit of background. I grew up in a little village just outside of Cambridge, UK. My family house is not that old, mid-60s and built on old water meadows. The house itself is a bungalow, so all the rooms are on one floor. The living rooms, lounge, kitchen, etc. to one side, and the bedrooms, bathroom to the other. The house is next door to a local church, whose very old foundations are Saxon. The main building of the church was built during the 13th to 15th century. There are a few tales about the church and its environs, but that is for another time. On to what I have experienced in my family house. I would say most of my experiences that I remember happened from about 15 to 19 when I left for university. I will highlight some of the more memorable ones, but it was always pretty consistent, and at times just a background level, such as doors opening, hearing your name on the breeze. Even now, there seems to be at times a breeze through the house, even if all the windows and doors are shut. One of the most memorable moments I had just moved bedrooms, from the one I shared with my brother to the smaller bedroom my sister had just vacated as she had gone to drama school in the southwest. I was quite happy as I was 15 and actually had my own room with my own TV. It was 94. It meant I did not have to watch songs of praise. The room itself was 13 feet square, I think, with one window overlooking the back garden. My sister had always said in that room she would be woken up in the middle of the night with someone banging really hard on the external wall. I ignored it. Being the younger brother, I thought she was just winding me up, though we always felt someone looking at us from the dark of the garden at night. I get myself settled into the room. A week or two passes, nothing happens. It's late August. It is warm. I have the window open. I wake up. I think it was about 3 a.m. in the morning. The house is quiet and dark. I hear the sound of something hitting rock or ice. A chipping noise from the garden. I found out later this was a precursor of what happened next. I'm very awake by this point. This goes on for a while. I thought I heard some talking faintly. The next moment, right next to the wall behind my head, the external wall, felt like someone wanted to smash it in. Panicked hammering of the wall. This happened for a minute. Could be longer, but it felt like eternity. Then silence, and nothing. I could not explain it. My heart was pounding. I could not sleep that night, or other times it happened. It happened about half a dozen times, but it was not the most vivid thing that happened in that room. I think the most vivid thing that happened only once from what I remember. I was about 17 at the time. I had gotten into the habit of leaving the radio playing in the background while I slept. I still sleep better with noise in the background. I woke up in the middle of the night. The house was quiet apart from the radio playing Hyper Ballad by Bjork. It had just come out. I felt a massive weight on my chest. I can only move my arms. I slowly moved them towards my chest to see if I can remove the invisible weight. Inch by inch, my arms seemed to struggle. I was playing rugby a lot at the time, so I was fit and strong. It should not have been that hard. I then managed to get my arms together. The weight disappeared suddenly. I then looked at the door, and it opens a crack, and I can picture it now. A lady's hand slowly comes in. Very strange, it is pale, almost translucent. I can see the end of what she is wearing. It is an embroidered lace with flowers, Victorian looking. As bizarre as it sounds, it reaches the light switch. It is a dimmer, so it turns it slightly on, then moves away again. Nothing else, just saying it was there. I don't sleep much that night either. This is an old town, one of the first in my province. This will be a telling of 3 different experiences. Around Christmas time, the weather was fair. It wasn't windy or too cold. I was watching a TV show. I do believe it was Letters to Santa or something. I was sitting in front of the TV, watching my show with the remote beside me, and the TV would flip to the news. A little confused, I would swap it back with the remote, and after a couple of minutes, it would swap to the news again. I was getting a little annoyed, so I called out to my mum, who was in the kitchen, and asked her why she kept swapping the channel, and if she wanted me to watch something else. She looked at me and said, "The remote is right beside you, I'm not touching the TV." Right after I asked her this, the TV started to flip through a bunch of channels. Then our old touch lamp started to act up. We owned this lamp for another 10 years, and they never acted like this ever again. It was like someone kept touching it and turning it all the way up, and then off, and then all the way up, and then off, over and over. and then it kept swapping through all the channels. A little freaked out, I yelled, "Stop! Switch it back to my show and stop messing with the lamp." Immediately it stopped and flipped it back to my channel. Nothing like this ever happened to me again. My mum watched this whole thing, and I remember turning to her, shrugging with my shoulders. My mum also told me she had been experiencing the light being turned off in the kitchen. And it couldn't have just been the power, because the light switch would be off. And this would happen to her all of the time while she was in the kitchen making food. This was shortly after I had asked my parents to move my bed upstairs. I was laying in bed, the streetlight coming in the window. I woke up to a really cold breeze by my bed. Not thinking much, I looked around and saw nothing. And suddenly, my curtains that were the gauzy white see-through ones flew up over my bed, like some strong breeze had come from under my bed and threw them over top of me. That itself was weird, but what was weirder was that they fell over this figure of a woman standing by my bed. It scared me so much I sat upright and pulled the curtains out of the way so I could see better. There was no one there. I was terrified, but I just threw my blankets over my head and went to sleep and just said, "Go away, go away, go away." I closed my eyes real tight. So as a kid, I was all about getting dirty and playing in the mud. I would find mud pits, get dirty as humanly possible, then go back home, change and wash and come back. I was a bit of a clean freak with my nails. I had gone out into this mud pit that was right across the street from my house. My parents had left me at home. Yeah, I know, 5-year-old alone. But this was a small town and everyone watched everyone's kids. So I'm out playing in the muck, up to my knees in mud, digging around, and I happened to find a cow bone. I pulled it out, and as I was making my way back down the street, I sunk into some mud, up to the hips, and couldn't get out. A nice guy came by and fished me out with a shovel. He asked me if I was okay. Everything was cool. When my parents got home, I showed them the bone and we cleaned it off. Later, me and my friends made a fort outside made of twigs. It was a pretty awesome fort. Put my cow bone in it. I came back the next day. While we were looking at the cow bone, we noticed something weird about it, and I went to pick it up. And thousands of daddy longlegs came pouring out of this bone. Then, shortly after that, wasps took it over. So I had to be torn down. A couple of weeks go by and I'm laying on the floor at my house, sleeping. My aunt sitting beside me, and I feel tickling. I giggle, and I say to my aunt, "Stop." She says, "Honey, I'm not tickling you." So I go back to sleeping. More tickling. I say, "Auntie, please stop, I'm trying to sleep." And she says, "I'm not tickling you." I pull back the blanket I'm under, and I'm covered in daddy longlegs. I scream, hop up, start crying, brush them off and run to my mum. My mum saying, "It's okay, they're harmless, they won't follow you." Well, they followed me across the floor, to my mum, and even my mum was freaked out. I hated that house so much for all the creepy stuff that happened. Hi all. I thought I would share some of my experiences living in a haunted house. I lived in this house for 14 years, just moving out of it last September. I'll start with a disclaimer that I was not a believer. I always thought ghosts were fascinating, but never looked for them blindly. Most of my early experiences I tried to find real explanations for. Honestly, this house had countless things happen, but I'll just relay some of the bigger ones. It was a townhouse, and the floor plan was living area upstairs, bedrooms downstairs. You entered the house on the top floor. My first night sleeping there, My bedroom was under the living room. I heard footsteps walking across the living room all night, to the extent that I grabbed my framing hammer a few times and snuck up there convinced that someone had broken in. This happened repeatedly for years, and I convinced myself that it was noise traveling through shared floor beams with neighboring units, although it still happened often, even when the unit I shared a wall with was vacant for 18 months. There were also a lot of odd times when doors would crack open slightly and close. Several times this happened when my mum's dog was over. He would walk towards the door, it would open for him. He would walk through and it would slightly close behind him. When he would come to leave the room, the door would let him out again. Weird. At some point, when my now wife moved in, it escalated. One night I woke up in bed and saw an opaque figure sitting up in our bed, initially thinking it was my wife sitting upright and looking out the window. When I asked what she was doing, she didn't reply. And when I went to shake her shoulder, my hand just went through nothing. I then realized she was asleep on the pillow, and whatever was standing there just vanished. I jumped out of bed and looked everywhere for an answer. Nothing. I told her about it months later, and she said, "Oh God, I've seen so many strange things here. I didn't want to tell you because you would have thought I was crazy." There was a lot of other little things. She would yell for me from downstairs because she swore she just saw me walk past the kitchen doorway, etc. Often things would move from where we put them. Once near Christmas, we left the house and came back to lights being turned on that we know weren't on, and ornaments on our tree being rearranged. We got a break at some point for a while, and when we were in bed one night, bedroom door closed. We made a joke about how our ghost hasn't been active for a while, and as soon as we said it, the bedroom door started shaking hard in place. Final share, and one that people seem to think is the creepiest. When our daughter was born, we would shush her to nap with the 3 shush method, rocking her in our arms saying shh, 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 shh. Well, I had put her down and ran to the hardware store. My wife called and said, "I thought you were at the hardware store." And I said, "Yeah, I am now." She paused and yelled, "Get home now." I ran back home. It was a 3-minute drive, and my wife was holding our daughter. She said that after I left, our daughter started fussing, and over the baby monitor, she heard a shh, 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 shh. And she got confused because she hadn't seen me go back downstairs, not realizing I was already down the hill when the noises started. One last one, daughter related. When she got a few years older, 3 or 4, she would cry at night, and one night I went in and asked her what was wrong. She said she was scared of the shadows. I showed her that shadows were just light tricks, and I did a shadow puppet. And she said, "I'm not scared of those shadows. I'm scared of the scary shadows that come sometimes." That honestly freaked me out a bit. Again, there were tons of other incidents, but these are all sort of our greatest hits. People always asked why I stayed in the house for so long, and as funny as it sounds to some, it was never scary. There was no feeling of malevolence or harm. In fact, I always thought the shushing of my baby story was more of a, wow, this ghost is nurturing thing. Or maybe even my dad coming back to visit. Anyhow, I hope you all have enjoyed some of this. This happened when I was about 17 and moved out on my own for about 9 months. I had a friend who lived in the walkout basement suite of this old house on Y. It wasn't horrible, but the backyard had an old, dilapidated pool full of stuff. Nice trees with a large driveway. I did use a Ouija board in this house, but nothing really happened. I just got really creeped out. On one occasion, when I was alone in the house, both roommates were gone. My boyfriend also was not home, and the upstairs landlord was gone. Me, quietly reading a book in the living room. I could hear someone walking around upstairs. I figured animals, no big deal. But then, I heard something opening cupboards and open the fridge door. Odd. I didn't think anyone was home, so I checked out front for cars. Nobody. Now, there were some stairs that led up to the landlord's half of the house, and I went up there and peeked under the door. It was locked. I saw the fridge door open and close and someone walk away from the fridge. I knocked and said hello to see if anyone was home. And sudden silence. Not a sound. Now, I had nowhere to go and I was really weirded out by myself. I just waited until someone got home. And I still felt weird. So I went up and asked the landlord when he came home. I asked him if he invited anyone over while he was gone, and he said no and asked me why. I told him what I heard and saw. He admitted to thinking the house was haunted because he's always finding cupboards open around the house. This was a bit of a party house, so the kids that drank here would line up bottle caps along the backsplash. One night when my boyfriend was over, we were relaxing on the couch, watching a movie, and we both heard 2 bottle caps fall off the backsplash, slide across the counter and fall off the edge. We both looked at each other and shrugged, not giving much notice. Shortly after the movie finished, my roommates had gone to sleep. I was giving my boyfriend a little back massage. It was totally quiet except him snoring blissfully away. And as I was massaging him, my back was to the kitchen. I heard all the dishes in the drying rack suddenly, slightly fall. It startled me a bit. Plus, I'm already a little leery from earlier, and him being asleep and I'm alone now. I'm now alone. I keep messaging him. I keep massaging him. It was as if someone leaned forward and whispered into my ear and said my name. It was so clear. Ice ran down my spine. I shook my boyfriend awake. "Was that you? Did you say my name?" Barely conscious, he said, "No, I was snoozing." I couldn't sleep all night and decided, right then, I was moving out. Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. As always, a big thank you to all of the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. If you want to help support this channel, you will find links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store in the description below. So feel free to have a look. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.